Hello guys! For my final presentation, I will be talking about drive-thrus, specifically in restaurants in the US. If you guys have ever been to the West Farms Mall in Farmington, Connecticut, you may know that there's a Wendy's nearby, and if you've been inside that Wendy's, you would know that it's pretty outdated. But more importantly, for what we're discussing about today, there's no drive-thru. Well, earlier this year, it was announced that this Wendy's will be demolished, and when it's rebuilt, it will contain a new drive-thru. And this is just one example of many drive-thrus that basically occupy every fast food restaurant and chain you've seen in this country. So, talking about the history of the drive-thrus in restaurants are actually a fairly recent thing, only really becoming popular with the masses in the 1970s. But starting off, the first fast food restaurant to add a drive-in, so think of places like Sonic, was Kirby's Pig Stand, which was built on the Dallas-Fort Worth Highway in Texas in 1921 and quickly expanded into a chain across the country. The 20s and 30s saw car ownership rise dramatically with drive-in restaurants appearing, and during this time, diners would relay their order to car hops, which were these waiters that would come to the vehicles outside and bring their orders, and then bring it back to the restaurant, and then bring their orders right to the vehicle. Car ownership did come to a head at the beginning of World War II, but after that, car ownership began to rise again, and the modern drive-thru restaurant became more of a reality as drive-thru banks and even drive-thru grocery and liquor stores became more common. Fast food titan McDonald's which was already blowing up during that time, was surprisingly slow on this trend though, as throughout the late 1940s and 50s, McDonald's instead installed the speedy service system where a streamlined menu was prepared pretty quickly and customers would basically just walk up and order at a self-serve window in the McDonald's, but at that point, drive-thru service was not available. So, in 1947, this new restaurant popped up called Red Giant's Hamburg, which is basically widely credited with being America's first drive-thru restaurant along Route 66 in Springfield, Missouri. Unlike the drive-in restaurants that preceded it, Red's Hamburg had a drive-up window rather than a car hop service. Then came the invasion of In-N-Out in the early 50s, as the first In-N-Out was created in 1948 in Baldwin Park, California, with drive-thru service in mind. The first In-N-Out had an innovative two-way speaker box that allowed drivers to order dinner without leaving their cars, basically. And it's recognized as the first fast food setup of its kind, paving the way for the modern drive-thru. The invention of cup holders in the cars during the 50s and 60s coincided with the exploding popularity of drive-thrus, and soon smaller American fast food chains were also getting in on the drive-thru hype, such as Jack in the Box, which was founded in San Diego in 1951, and the drive-thru concept was built into the business from day one. Burger King, which was initially called Insta Burger King, wouldn't embrace the drive-thru until 1975, but before then, they would focus on a self-service model that relied on a kit called the Insta Broiler, which cooked burgers pretty fast. So, going back to McDonald's, their success skyrocketed after businessman Ray Kroc franchised the chain in 1955, opening its first location in Des Plaines, Illinois, but still to no full drive-thrus in their restaurants until 1975, the same year as Burger King, where drive-thrus would come to the restaurants, and the first location was in Sierra Vista in southern Arizona. The US continued to embrace the drive-thru concept into the 1990s, and by that point, drive-thru pharmacies, banks, liquor stores, grocery stores, and of course fast food restaurants invaded the entire country. The first Starbucks drive-thru opened in 1994 in Southern California, and soon dozens of outlets followed suit. And now we're at the modern day, where Taco Bell introduced its first 4-lane drive-thru, allowing up to 4 cars at any one time, and helping to cut down queues, which we will see a picture of shortly. Today, as drive-thrus in restaurants have become more popular and national restaurant chains are only expanding across the country, and in other parts of the world. New concepts such as Taco Bell Defy, which opened up in June of 2022 in Brooklyn Park, Minnesota, as you can see in the top left, to a few planned drive-thru only restaurants from Burger King, as you can see in the bottom right, could become the new norm as companies seek to create more profits through the consumer choice of using a drive-thru. Also, currently established restaurant companies expanding into new states and countries, such as with In-N-Out in Meridian, Idaho, on the top right, and with the Popeyes in Nova Scotia, as you can see in the bottom left, creating bogglingly long lines in the drive-thru on opening day as traffic spilled out onto roads and even highways. The numbers also reflect these developments, as 40% of customers avoid going into a store that doesn't have a drive-thru. 28% of customers also prefer using the drive-thru versus only 14% going to the store. And installing a drive-thru like the one planned for the Wendy's in Farmington, Connecticut, has its benefits for people's perception of the store, as at the least, 68% of customers judge the quality of a store by their drive-thru. And this GIF in the back is from a McDonald's commercial in 2000 that included the characters from Toy Story 2. And I thought this GIF specifically for that commercial, which you can Google, just demonstrates how wide and deep the marketing for drive-thrus are in America. Anyways, you can clearly see that there is a demand for fast food delivered through drive-thrus, but why? According to Barb Giddis, who is a CVO at pointofsale.cloud, which do note, consult, and create software for restaurants, including fast food ones, says getting out of the car to go into a restaurant can only add friction to the ordering process, especially for families with small children or pets that come with them. And the stats back that up, as 61% of respondents say that the drive-thru tends to be the fastest option, saying that they appreciate the comfort of remaining seated. And theoretically, 52% of respondents say that the drive-thru is appealing to avoid long lines. But there's a bit of a conundrum here, as how the drive-thru looks can even influence where a customer chooses to eat. This can be a good thing if the line is not too long, but turns bad quickly, which is why there's quite an emphasis on this timely service. On the flip side, though, why do businesses like using drive-thrus for their restaurants? Simply speaking, money talks. Just imagine the amount of food being sold in these fast times see here on the left is quite mind-boggling. And restaurants are only trying to make this time go by faster and create more generate more profits with better technology and customer service. This picture here is one of many in the 2023 drive-thru report by QSR. It just has a lot of good information overall about the state of drive-thrus and restaurants in general. So if you want to read more about it, you can check my works cited for that. Anyways, speaking of modern construction of drive-thrus, nowadays, drive-thrus are often placed in areas with high traffic, i.e. off of exit highways and long roads that includes other businesses. The lanes are usually wide enough to accommodate all kinds of vehicles and long enough that the car traffic doesn't spill out to other places. There are usually curbs and barriers intended to guide vehicles through the drive-thru, keeping order by preventing cars from cutting the line. And some drive-thrus nowadays have been incorporating mobile order technology to allow customers to place orders online, who can then pick them up at a designated drive-thru lane. There is usually a lot of signage and lighting installed to guide vehicles and to ensure visibility and safety at night, alongside cameras that are often installed for security purposes. Digital or static menu boards that change into order confirmation screens, for example, are positioned often with the preview menu board placed earlier in the queue to allow customers to decide before reaching the order station with speaker systems, and also display the customer's order to ensure accuracy before proceeding. Many drive-thrus also have separate windows for payment and food pickup to streamline the process. This might include one window for taking payments and another for delivering the order. And these windows usually have awnings or overhangs to protect staff and customers from the elements during transactions. But in contrast, these changes do come after a lot of experimentation with drive-thrus starting in the 20s, 30s, where most drive-thrus back then had single narrow lanes that were usually exposed to weather conditions. They also had pretty minimal signs, simple menu boards, often with single window service for payment and receiving your order. For a long time, there was manual order taking with employees, usually women, called car hops, as we saw in the beginning, with very rudimentary speaker boxes that just simply don't hold up to today. Overall, there was just much less environmentally conscious with their land use and limited accessibility features, unlike today. The modern design of the drive-thru has only exacerbated the environmental effects of drive-thrus, though. Think about all the times you have sat waiting at a drive-thru for your order. The amount of air and noise pollution that one creates just from idling in a drive-thru is quite large, and is only going to increase unless electrical vehicles become a mainstay in the future, but even then, the damage is still done. Drive-thrus also contribute to sprawl and the urban island heat effect by increasing land use and the amount of concrete needed to comply with zoning laws for these restaurants, which and then creates habitat loss, a lack of biodiversity, as certain animal and plant species can't thrive in these environments, disrupting natural ecosystems while also raising temperatures and reducing green spaces for our socioeconomic health. Knowing these environmental effects, another alternative to sitting in the restaurant is to offset one's carbon footprint a bit is potentially walking up to a drive-thru window, especially if these up-and-coming drive-thru only restaurants become the norm, or if the seating area of the restaurant is closed at night, for example. But for the most part, workers will not serve you, mainly due to safety and liability issues. As drive-thrus are mainly designed for cars, it becomes a liability issue for the businesses if pedestrians get injured in drive-thru lanes due to drivers' behavior. Other reasons that may not be considered at first is traffic flow being slowed down by pedestrians, and that drive-thru systems are usually optimized for cars, hence the name. Intercoms are usually positioned for drivers and payment systems designed for reaching out to a car window for a payment. So adding pedestrians to the line just makes it harder for staff to take orders and receive payment from pedestrians efficiently. There are also other effects of drive-thrus in restaurants on the surrounding areas, such as construction of more roads to accommodate traffic that could spill out onto the street at peak times, as we saw earlier, which can lead to less walkable neighborhoods that leads to a more sedentary lifestyle for all. They also contribute to more dangerous conditions for pedestrians, increase greenhouse gas emissions, create lots of litter and waste, and can heavily impact local restaurants. As you can see here on the right, this is the location of Taco Bell to buy. And as you can see, there's a bunch of roads and residential areas, but not much else in the way of walkability in terms of these places. And as you could see with these effects of drive-thrus on surrounding areas, it creates less walkability and less sustainable parts of the city overall. Currently, there's not much done to actively mitigate these problems besides a few notable exceptions. In 2018, the city of Portland, Oregon updated its zoning maps and codes for the 2035 comprehensive plan. One of the new rules allows people to bike up or walk to the fast food order window, and this basically applies to all drive-thrus, not just in restaurants, but at banks and pharmacies as well, for example. As we have discussed before, though, drive-thrus are mainly made for cars, which have historically not been very kind to pedestrians through their construction, such as making sensors for drive-thrus more sensitive to pedestrians or bikers, for example. So it would be interesting to see some studies that study the effect of this ordinance today. But I couldn't find anything, but if you did, please leave it in the comments. Also, Minneapolis, Minnesota is trying to tackle this conundrum by outright banning construction of the new drive-thrus in August of 2019. There's the issue of drive-thrus being put in place before the ordinance that are still in operation today, alongside some cases of corporations actually going against this ordinance. At the end of the day, drive-thrus are a fundamentally classist idea. From the perception of drive-thrus in the public and businesses' eyes to construction and usage of drive-thrus, not just in restaurants, but in banks, pharmacies, etc., needing a car is vital to get to these essential services in the first place. But that's a bigger conversation on the state of current urban development. I've personally put a few ideas here on what you can do to mitigate this problem, which mainly includes supporting local restaurants and walkable areas and spreading awareness on these issues with drive-thrus, and not just in restaurants, but in other sectors. But I'd also like to know what you guys think that we could do. There's also the issue of eating out less in these often fast food types of restaurants, but the intersection between fast food and restaurants, urban development, and environmental issues is a whole other presentation and would make this video much longer. But anyways, these are also a few books that I'd recommend if you want to learn a bit more about this issue. Here is my works cited. And thank you guys for listening to this very long presentation, and I hope you guys enjoyed it. Thank you.